to another episode of the Pakistan Experience, and it's quite an honor, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation because for once there's a topic that I don't know much about, and I'm really sorry if I'm going to ask dumb questions that you've answered a million times. First of all, it's an honor and a privilege to have Dr. Suraj Yengde with us. How are you doing, sir?
Thank you, Shahzad, and thank you to all the listeners and viewers of the Pakistani Experience. I'm really honored to come to this show.
No, thank you so much for coming on. For people who don't know him, Dr. Suraj Yengde is one of India's leading scholars and public intellectuals, named as one of the 25 most influential young Indians by GQ magazine and the most influential young Dalit by Z. He's also the author of the best-selling book, Caste Matters, and is currently holding a research associate position with the Department of African and American Studies at Harvard University. So first of all, how did you get to Harvard, sir? There are a lot of people who are interested in your journey.
Yeah, it's been a ride. It was not a simple path for me, Shahzad, because I did not know what Harvard was until 2008 when President Barack Obama became the president, and his bio said that he was an alum of Harvard, and he did some activism there. And my attraction to Harvard was basically through Obama, because obviously a Black man himself, a child of a Kenyan, of course, a Kenyan intellectual as well. And so if I have to look at what propelled or me to go to Harvard, or how did I go to Harvard, there has to be this story of a boy growing up in Dalit slums in Maharashtra, India, close to Hyderabad, and what would it take to go? And I think one of the effective ways of looking at any story in this case is to look at what is the thing that permanently handicaps you, puts you in a situation of more and more trauma. And many people, any community in the world that has received repeated episodes of trauma always looks for alternatives that can enhance the quality of not only their life, their family, but also the community. Because when you are a victim of a society, you're not a victim alone, you're part of a community, you're part of a group. And so you kind of look it as such. And, it has happened with the Jews, for example, of Europe, who left during the First World War and Second World War, most dominantly to the rest of the world. And that's how they kind of created this. For me, it was not a straight path, as I told you. If I had known, like I always tell, I went to Harvard 5 years late. I could have gone 5 years earlier. And then if you look at that 5 year is not just your calendar year. Each year is almost representative of the multiple generations that you have lost in that. So that's been one of the kind of stories that come about. It needs much more expansion of this kind of a short pitch I give, and maybe down the line sometime I'll give a larger treatment to this.
I think that's the trouble with having people as well accomplished as you. I can literally take one topic and talk about just that for 2 hours, but maybe your story is indicative of the larger problem itself. And I was watching a session that you had with the BJP leader as well, and somehow they think that because one person got out of the sewers don't exist. They take your story as a shining example of the new India, that if Dalits were so persecuted, how would Dr. Suraj Yengde make it to Harvard? So the idea that just because you had to, or not even you, maybe if you had the privilege or you were a Brahmin, your father would have gone to Harvard. But he had to work as a peon, save money, take loans, send you to a school, and all the hurdles that you had to cross to get to where you are. What would you say to people who look at that and say, look, the problem has been solved. Dr. Suraj Yengde has made it to Harvard. How are Dalits being persecuted?
No, I think that's, and that's the fear, right? That's one of the traumatic resurgence of such treatment. Like even in this moment of your accomplishment, you're traumatized by not allowing you to express your true self, because they would like to only buy the narrative that will suit the ruling class. In India's case, the ruling castes. The people I went to and I rubbed my shoulders at Harvard were the people I would have never thought in my life I would have any opportunity. These were the kind of people I would watch in TV or watch their stories on films. The kind of names they had were the names I would watch in popular cinemas. And so these were the people for me were naturally born to taste the crust of this tiramisu. And they needed that validation. And so for me to go there and to realize that some of their references, like almost everybody that I know had relatives, not a relative, outside India. And if they had got a frustrated moment, they could just book a flight and go to a different state in America, or call upon friends, and their friends were located in any part of the world they choose to go, and they have accommodation there, they have a place there. And this is very basic, right? But you will see how caste as well as class intersect to create this facade of, oh, it's the equal world, it's the world of equality and all of that. And I think, Shehzad, this has been one of the frustrating experiences. Even the kind of music they listen to, the kind of pop artists they follow, the series they look up on their TV since childhood. I mean, this is a very vast world. And now for people to really, make an exception out of it, I mean, it's a great thing. I mean, thank you for recognizing me, but don't you see that's a failure, that there is only one Suraj Yengde, or there is few Suraj Yengdes here and there in different pockets? Why not have it in an enormous amount? And that's why I've been advocating for representation of students who belong to the marginalized communities in India to get a foot and get a state support as well as private support. So we kind of create a system that empowers not least one person or the community, but it creates more ripple effect. You know how it is, like snowball. You look at someone and then, and for people who never had opportunity, all they need is two things, I feel. One is a living example, an alive example. Somebody who is moving, who is talking, who speaks like them, who eats food like them, who cusses the same way like them. So people need, you can't really disassociate. Like many times people tell me, you have to tone yourself down. Now you are no longer the Suraj that came from Ambedkar Nagar, from Nanded, and but I think they don't understand. They miss the fact that my constituency is not you. My constituency is still the kids who are back home and who look up and who really want people like them, who's speaking in their accent, unki zaban se jo baat kar rahe, who feel like, who are using similar phrases. And as you know, every city, every village has its own unique words. So people would like to hear those. And especially if you come from bastis, like slums, it's not a, what you call bearable language. For us, it's bearable, but these are the words that are really, oh my God, what did you just call me? It's like a very emotional meltdown words kind of for certain sections of society. So one is the living example. And the second is someone needs to just tell them that, listen, you are beautiful. Listen, you are talented. You can accomplish. All you have right now is what it takes to a winner. Somebody just wants to be validated. So once you provide that validation, I think there is a large scope.
You should tell them that you should be thankful. I'm just cussing. अगर मैं अम्बेडकर का सूरज होता तो अभी उठा लेता आपको.
नहीं और in fact अम्बेडकर का सूरज भी तो उनको ये नहीं होने देता है ना. They cannot tolerate, they cannot foresee it, and that's why there is a whole thing of appropriation of this, Ambedkar's story as well. So,
So,
that continues to happen.
I mean, we're speaking to an international audience which may not be as well informed. So sometimes I feel like comparing things doesn't mean you're saying they're the same, but they give you a place into the conversation. So would you say कि आपने कहा कि सिर्फ एक डॉक्टर सूरज नहीं होना चाहिए, but I'm glad that one Dr. Suraj exists, because the other representation is, for instance, if BJP leaders or Congress leaders or any leaders, not to target one party, say that there's a Dalit president, what are you talking about? But that president may not speak as eloquently as you. That president may not put forward the causes of Dalits and may just exist as a token representation without actually voicing the people that he is meant to represent. Whereas you do that. So they will never select you as the president. I hope they do, but they will never. So at least you're speaking out about it as opposed to tokenism. What would you say to people who just think token empowerment or token involvement suffices and that's enough?
No, I think, we have to understand that, if you are living in someone else's house, you are not the owner. You have to follow the rules of, you are a guest. At best, you are given, you are a rentier. और किराए का मकान में रहने वाले जो किराएदार होते हैं, उनकी औकात कुछ नहीं होती. Should the makan malik decide to throw you out, you're out. Many of the political parties that belong to the dominant caste groups in India, the Brahmin Baniya parties, as it's famously called, these are basically the houses owned by these Brahmin Baniyas. They need Dalits because the constitutional measures force them to have a Dalit because of reservations, because of a constituency that is having a quota seats in politics and other places as well. If there was no reservation, they wouldn't need Dalits per se. So for Dalits to be in this party is a very vulnerable state they are in. Because even though they are there, they try their best in their capacity as a rentier to create a move, to create a certain type of activism, try to wreak justice. But the owner of the house is our enemy. They can't see us in a position of power or successful. So even though the Dalit president or Dalit minister in this Brahminical parties, be it any party, Congress, BJP, not least, but also regional parties that are Brahminical, they don't get adequate space to express. And that's why their life goes in frustration, because community hopes from you that you will bring certain amount of justice. And they want to do it, If you're a Dalit, if you grew up in a Dalit background, you know what it means to be a person who is persecuted. So you try your best to do it. But because of this asymmetrical system that you exist, it becomes difficult. And I think one of my personal observations that I have noticed over the time is that the Dalit ministers would like to do, but the bosses would not like. And that's why we are belief is we need our own political base. जहां पर आपका खुद का घर हो, खुद ही मालिक हो उसके अंदर, have an equal stake in it. And that's why we have political parties like Bahujan Samaj Party, or if you go in South India, there are many Dalit political parties. And I think through that, and of course, they're powerful, but also within the dominant hegemonic phase, they can't do it. So even though the president of India is a Dalit, he is nevertheless a member of a party that will not approve of his decisions. If he's a president, he was not allowed to enter the temple, one of the temples. He and his wife was humiliated. Can you imagine one petty a priest, a Brahmin, could have muster the courage to tell the president of India, the number one citizen of the India, to not, they were not allowed to enter the sanctum space of the temple. And there are their justifications. So don't believe in these distractors who are always trying to justify. And if you make this issue, they will make it they will misdirect your attention. These are the people who are responsible for the downfall, not least of India, but entire subcontinent. You can find them in each localities, in each nations. Their aim is to amass the wealth of the new post-colonial economy under the rubric of donations from different kinds of countries, but also continue to own important resources of their own countries. We still have feudalism. You might call it, it is not existing, but look at your leaders. Look at your leaders, look at our leaders. These are the people, now there might be a couple token heads who might not have traditional wealth, but the entire political base is basically people who have been zamindars for not 2-3 generations, for ever since there has been, Mughal regime, or even, these were the servants. Now the servants of these colonizers, and British were not the only colonizers. You can also refer to different colonizations. Now they want to become the petty bosses, and they use all measures in their textbook to misdirect your attention. So sometimes the issue becomes India-Pakistan issue. Sometimes it becomes Hindu-Muslim issue. Sometimes it becomes minority issue. Sometimes it becomes issue of the US. Sometimes it becomes the issue of neighboring. At the end of the day, all they do is to find out the faults, to blame someone else. There is hardly a leader in our part of the world who will come and say, I fucked up. I'm sorry. I tried my best. I lost it all. So this is not something to do with politics, as they call it. It is to do with your upbringing. It is to do with what are the values given to you by your ancestors. If you are always relying on cheat and deceit and befooling people and amassing wealth in the name of different kinds of faith or customs, then basically that proves that your blood is not the blood that demands accountability. This is a contaminated blood that has penetrated across the spectrum. And we will see very few people who will muster this genuine courage and transparency in the way we look at something. It's not a glass house, it's a house that has been closed. And that's why we have bondage labor, we have peasants, and then, in societies like India, even Bangladesh, and Nepal, most of these lowest workers are belonging to the lowest castes who were traditionally required. And I think this is the problem we need to bring on. The communal issue, the religion issue, is a theocratic issue. Theocratic issue cannot be resolved in any country in today's world. If you are talking about 1,000 or 1,500 years ago, probably there was a way to deal with it. Today, our problems are different. Today, Shehzad from Pakistan can talk to Suraj from India, who is now somewhere else, right? And the communication has increased, the understanding has increased, and education has become a mass commodity. Erstwhile, it was only available to the interpreters of, education always came from the root of religion, so to say. But religion, the way we understand today, is not the same the way we have to look at it. It was a way of life, and the way we have made it. So what we have done is we have created these artificial problems heaped upon them through a certain interpretation of history upon the people, and given them it as a lollipop to suck upon until they die. But the real problems will never be resolved. What we want is now that whatever problems you've been telling us for so far, we are least concerned with that. What we want is give us what concretely belongs to us. What is the concern for our immediacy? What will address our pains right now, instead of misdirecting the attention. So when you will raise the issue of Dalits, they will make it an issue of something else. If you raise the issue of representation of Dalits, then they will talk about the inability of Dalits. And if you are forcing them, then they will point out to this. So these are all excuses. It really takes a courage. And we might criticize the way we want any nation, but there are certain nations in this world still today who openly come and acknowledge that we have done mistake. Now, Canada's Justin Trudeau, we might have enormous opinions about him, but at least a head of a state says that Canada is responsible for the mistreatment it gave to the Punjabis who came to Canada and they were not allowed. There was an episode. He apologizes on behalf of the nation. He apologizes to the natives, what they call First Nations in Canada. tell me our leaders who have gone on stage and asked a public state apology from its own people for doing wrong. If the answer is negative, you know that our problems are not going to be resolved by these people.
In many ways, I think the issue is even more pronounced in Pakistan, what you're talking about in terms of elite capture. Often when we talk like this openly, we're presented, some Indian fans of ours comment ke, aap apna mulk to dekh lein. Hum dekh rahe hain apna mulk, isliye to hum ye baatein karte hain. I mean, in a Muslim majority country like Pakistan, 70 saal se somehow Islam khatre mein, and now this idea of the Hindu identity is emerging. You've also said, and I tweet that you got some flack on, is Hinduism is a ploy to keep backward castes lower. So would you say that things like castes were solely invented to keep the class structure?
No, absolutely. See, there is no separation of this if you look at it in actual materialist sense. Caste is a spiritual sanction to maintain the difference. Now, the difference is basically established as a spiritual, sometimes occurred as natural difference. And, there are differences, but there are also not differences. Class, on the other hand, as you know, is a very much market oriented, and it can be, and if you look through the understanding of Marx and Lenin, you can have a class struggle. Even in Pakistani, the societies, there are caste groups. In fact, Dalits are also most persecuted who converted to Christianity. New York Times, and how Dalit identity sits at the center. So it doesn't matter what faith you are. This caste supremacy exists. There are Jats, there are Hindu or Islam. Either way, the Ashrafs, the dominant caste people who are having this basic resources in an enormous amount, would not like to get it away from. So we would like to propose, instead of making a hegemonic identity, we are older people. We have much more historical juncture. In fact, the Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, the modern civilizations are from and we trace. One of my urge has been to go to India. Pakistan. I've been invited for so many times, and hopefully I will make my way through it. But also there is a rich Buddhist history there, which really is the crux of history. Before arrival of Islam or Christianity and all, what was this land about? And I think a nativist perspective will provide much more confidence to us. It's very unfortunate, especially in northern India, the people who belong to different communities have a certain understanding that we might be the descendants of Mughals. That's not possible. Mughals were only living within their own edifice of class structure. Here's the Marathas, they came over and they had their own regimes. It's basically after Mughal time. We are talking about 16th, 17th century. So there is a very interest who has a story in this. And if we create a native perspective, not to exclude others, but to bring a confidence, I think then we'll have a much more robust conversation. Or British invented, we have nothing to do with. So that's why we need much more historical reading of our conditions than the conditions. But we should not confine our conversation only to that 100 or 90 year of formalized British rule in India.
It seems to be a lag in the video, but I'm still getting the audio, so hopefully we should be fine. You can still hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're getting the audio at least. So you've mentioned the Leninists and Marxists, and I'm sure at Harvard you rubbed shoulders with many of them. What would you say to the ideal that they present, that all these other identity politics are actually fracturing the idea of class, that gender or caste or religion, once you dig deep enough, it eventually just becomes about class. So class should be the main identifier through which we should talk about revolution, or we talk about system change. Do you think that idea minimizes the role that other identities play?
No, I think it can go complementarily, right? Now, what has happened is we have to look at what the ruling class usually uses to retain its hegemony. And you will see It uses the parlances of, now it has become gender. Gender was not really in conversation. And even still, it's not that stronger. But they definitely use the majoritarian, minoritarian identity. They use the idea of religion. They use the idea of ethnicity, race. In our case, they use the idea of caste. Now, if we have to bring about a counter argument to that, we have to not engage with the same logics that they are offering. We have to give something else as a counter, because it will become a tutu meme. It's going to be the debate of egg and hen, who came first and who came, But to avoid that brawl, which is not going anywhere, we need to counter them. And that's why, as I said, we need to go back to the roots. And the roots will be, definitely there is an element of class unity, but also we have to find out what caste means in this case. See, because caste is unique to our region, not only unique, but the history is quite unique. And it is across all the religion. So the hegemonic identities of religion has created such a nasty program that the elites of this religion still, go to enjoy their fruits of life, like their children are coming to Harvard and Oxford, be it Pakistan, be it India, be it any other nation. They have access to material resources. They have connections. They really live in a society that is different. I was told, I've never been to Pakistan, but I was told by my Pakistani friends, the way you imagine Pakistan is certainly not the way, and that's very sure. And they were saying how much of a society indulges in drinking, indulges in this kind of lifestyle. And he said you should just look up on the weekend part, especially some friends in Karachi and Lahore were saying, you got to come and visit so you can really see. So then what that really means for me is, certainly then there is a caste community within Pakistani society that has really remained untouched with the rise of any form of nationalism, because the ruling class has always maintained its position to be ruling class. It doesn't matter. It's the most disloyal disloyal class that it has created. And I think what we need to do here is to unite people depending on what they need, necessities. As I said, there has to be two approaches. If we make it only a class struggle, then there is a fear that class struggle might be divided based on the groups of, he is not belonging to my community. He doesn't belong to this. This person is somebody who is, class unity has the possibility of uniting this. But also, if you have not addressing the basic contradictions, and what are the basic contradictions? These are everyday contradictions. These are the contradictions that people are told to believe of. This person should do this only kind of work. How can this Chuda Chamar stand with me? How can this lower be with me? So we have to, that's why I need also an anti-caste lens. And let me tell you, these broader categories of faith are people's personal wishes. If they want, they will pray. If they don't, they will not pray. But if we give them basic necessities, after that, they will find a refuge. What has happened is the elites have used a sacred aspect of spiritual reclusing of themselves, of people. It's faith is somebody's personal choice. It has really a transcendental value. Nobody can be in anyone else's faith's domain. If you are meditating, if you are praying, if you are offering your own spiritual dedications within your own zone, it's only you. And if you believe in God, it's God. Someone like me who doesn't believe in God, it's just something to do with not God. But that zone is a very powerful zone. I can't indulge in the way someone else worships, and Shehzad cannot indulge in the way Suraj worships. Do you know what I mean? Like but for us to create a society that also acknowledges this, that see, there is a value of somebody who has a faith in something. And faith is a strong moving force. It might be scientific, it might be non-scientific, each on its own, for as long as that remains your personal practice, right? See, Yugoslavia is a country, was a country. Now it's broken. There was a huge Muslim population, Catholic, Christians, the Orthodox Christians, and then you will see how they live. I mean, there is orthodoxy in both societies, but also there is a kind of a move to not really rely. There are minarets of mosques, and then this is all Turkish influence, right? Because the Turkish Empire was expanding in these parts of the world, including India as well. And so what we need is to create an amalgamation of each for its own, but when it comes to living in a society that requires each one to live with decent housing, decent education, decent healthcare, dignity in the work, these issues can be addressed by creating a caste class associations, bringing people together. And then we can say, you know what, if you want to go to that mosque, if you want to go to that dargah, if you want to go to that church or temple, you do you. We don't have to. That maturity will only come, I think, Shehzad, when people are provided a groundswell of much more understanding of their history. Our history is unfortunately always very sadly related to religious history. Why? We have to ask a question. Why should a story of a human being begin with a religion and always animate with religion? It has to have its presence, but not always. And that creates a fanaticism. And then, you find an enemy from the story. History mein, who did what? Okay, so that, or they are still enemy. The enemies are still there. The Yahudis are still there. The Christians are still there. The Muslims are still there. The Buddhists, I think, and so I approve of you about the class, but I will also add the native aspect of caste that can bring out a much more robust and nuanced understanding of this.
In many ways, I think what's happening in Pakistan really strengthens your argument as well. And I've heard you be dismissive of the idea when people say that the idea of caste is not inherent to Hinduism. It's just something that happens in practice. And I've seen you dismiss that based on semantics, that it doesn't matter to the person who's being discriminated based on caste. It's quite similar in Pakistan. One can argue that Islam in their books, in its essence, has never any, is not casteist, does not have an idea of caste, but in practice, it's all about caste in Pakistan, to the extent that we have newspaper ads for jobs from the government itself. The constitution can say all it wants, that nobody will be discriminated based on religion or caste, but the government ads say that the sweeper must be Christian. When the government itself is putting ads like that, they're already creating a system that's based on discrimination. All the things that you talked about, I mean, again, there are a million strands I can pick up, even in terms of how fascists love contorting history and creating that the groundwork they need for their fascist policies. Putin has done that in Russia, trying to change what the Soviet Union was to the people and then creating that Russian identity. We've struggled with that question of the Muslim identity. Would you say that this reassertion of the Hindu identity, whether it even be in the form of things that seem harmless, making a movie that actually was the first Hindu who came up with the idea of the airplane, things like this, which reaffirm the majoritarian identity, do you think that always necessarily happens at the expense of the minority identity, or can that be done without discrimination or without persecution?
I think it's a very important question, and I think it really makes one think also. In fact, because what is it that one is trying to say by establishing one's superiority over anyone else, and yet not persecute the minorities or create an issue of discriminating someone else? I think this is an important point. Like, for example, if you're a Lala or if you're somebody who is owning, who has your own farmhouse and all, apne chat pe jaake kitne gaane gaana hai gao, nobody will care about it, right? But if you're using that to telecast via radio, you're creating a problem for everybody else. So I think we have really created. We have lifted up the veil of between public and private. So it has really become a society without a private sphere, which is very dangerous. Everybody needs privacy, everybody needs private sphere. But because of this community nature of our existence, we have not removed that. We have not maintained that veil. So now the difficulty with that happens is You might invent plane or you might be a superior people and all. But when you say that, you are literally trying to say others have not done that, which also might be true, and each on its own. For example, if somebody says Hindus invented first plane, I mean, good for you. Now what are you trying to assert with that? So then there will be a Muslim who will say, oh, this was written in Quran even before blah, blah, blah. Then somebody will say Quran was just created in 1400 years ago. What are you talking about? What is previously? And this is the thing, the tu meme debate. It will never end, because these people who are claiming Hindu or Muslim identity from the subcontinent are not originally Hindus, are not originally Muslims. These are the people, they have had their own indigenous traditional faith. Before Islam came, before the idea of Hindu came, which is basically Brahminism, that was known. We have to go back to what were you without your clothes of your religion or your caste identity. Once you get naked, then there is something similar between Shehzad and Suraj. It's not just the name. It's the way we see, it's the way we imagine, it's the way we eat, it's the way we respect, talk. It has something to do with the nature of our common upbringing. And this is what the stories are constantly repeated to us, right? So one can have multiple identities. That's fine, as long as it remains within the private sphere, right? You can be whatever you want. You can be a Muslim. If you want, you can be a gay, you can be a lesbian woman, you can be a trans person, you can be poor, you can be rich, you can be person of certain nationality. That's something that has to do with you. But when we come in a public sphere, which is different than a private sphere, one has to really recognize the nature of our societies. Now, very sadly, even the people from our areas, because I come from a Muslim-dominated area, at least we were ruled by Nizam. We were never ruled by British. There is this feeling. Every other convert who got converted 3-4 generations, 5-6 generations ago, which is very great for them. They just found a certain utopia in the religion. Now the problem is they start to think themselves as Turks, as nobles, and they have this huge complex about the life that happens in Arabic world. Now the tragedy is not this. It's not reciprocal. It's not reciprocal. You might go to Turk and then you might still be asked to stand in a different line. You might go to Arabic world and you will still be mistreated. So what essentially happens is there is a huge crisis of one's geographical identity. And to empower that, we need to give them the stories that will assimilate your origin of where you came from, plus your religion. That will work. But in this case, it doesn't happen. And that's why we see the problem that has always confined one to a religious identity. In Chechnya, Muslims, the Uyghurs in China, the state wants a certain identity for them to have, but the locals are refusing. And that's why it becomes public. And in a communist regime, it's difficult. It's a communist regime. Communism has a rule, but if you're living in a democratic republic framework where constitution has a certain value that perhaps recognizes the faith. So what we need to tell our people is, listen, you must be XYZ faith. Yes, you must be XYZ caste. Let's go back to where our ancestors came from. Forget about this for a moment. Can you forget that you are X faith, you are that faith? Just for a moment. Let's assume for 1 hour, Shehzad is not Shehzad. Shehzad is S and Suraj is S. And let's get naked of our identities that we have been built up over several generations and go back. And then maybe you will see that our DNAs are same. Our stories are same. Our histories are same. There is a certain pride in that. And if you want to really be proud of our region, we should be really embracing the Harappa Mohenjo-daro civilization. Not that the way the Brahmins have interpreted, but the way it was always. It was the historic native, and then look at the Buddhist history. That's basically a vast camp. That's the identity of our region. That's basically your, be it Gandhara, which is now Kabul, Bactria, again, Afghanistan and Pakistan, Peshawar, all these regions were the fertile lands of exchange. In fact, Pakistan has such a pride history of this Buddhist past, this Harappa Mohenjo-daro's history that really grows in that womb. And if we focus on that, Shehzad, imagine how great we can have, how we can develop such a great confidence and complexities that we might be able to engage proactively with these newfound civilizations, right? People who have found several centuries ago only. Several centuries ago, they found, and now it has become. So we should not follow their model. See, America and other countries, Canada, they don't have a sense of history the way we have. We have our longer sense of history, right? And we don't have a sense of history the way they have as a slavery or indenture or occupation. Our sense of history is something that relies on developing modernity, developing a culture, developing a new forms of sanitation, a civilization, housing. These are the lessons we should actually tell our children. And if there is a morning you want to go and pray, go pray, come back. Let that not be part of you. But what we have done is we have replaced that. In fact, we have suppressed everything that is original to us. And we have embraced that has been given to us. And with that, you will also see a few generations later, if you don't tell your child what is name of your grandparents, they will forget their name of great-grandparents. And that has been sadly happening to our region. And this hegemonic identities of religious polarization has enormously contributed. But we have stakes in this. The people from the upper echelons, they don't have stakes in this. Because if you scratch the history, they are the criminals. So they don't want you to investigate more, because you will find that who is culpable for such mayhem. And then you will see like, oh, okay, maybe these are the people. So to misdirect, they have created this narrative. And I think we really need to subvert that. Some people might not agree with this kind of interpretation, but there is a way one can essentialize this by not necessarily falling into the adage proposed by the ruling class, which is always oppressing us.
It's the lies that they tell us to keep oppressing us, so that the veneer of morality, even if it's a mullah who says God is inaccessible to you and you can only access God through me, the idea that God's omnipotent and God is everywhere, but can only be accessed through this one mullah who sits in this mosque in the corner. The issue here is, I think in isolation, all these things make sense. And I'm a huge fan of the Cartesian method as well. Just find that one undubitable truth, and a lot of Buddhist ideas are also similar. But I think the issue then becomes, so for instance, in Pakistan, when the state takes a job, it's fine for me to say in private that I'm proud to be a Muslim, no issues with that. But I think when it becomes the state thinks of itself as their duty to define, the constitution says what a Muslim is, and then once you do that, you're necessarily saying who's not a Muslim. And after years of indoctrination or repetition of those same ideas, it's not far-fetched to see a village mob get together and decide that, oh, I've read this in the constitution, this person is not a Muslim. And from there, the slippery slope to let's lynch this person because now my religion is under attack. I think that's what's dangerous, right? So even in the US, if somebody says I'm white and proud, everybody is scared of that statement, even though somebody's saying I'm just proud of my race. But there is a historical baggage to that. So now that Hindu identity is not as similar as it's not as simple as just saying I'm Hindu and proud. The fact that BJP has turned it into a mass consciousness, and that Hindu identity connected with that Indian identity, with a constitutional effort to define who an Indian is and who an Indian is not, how dangerous is that now?
I think, one of the things is we are staunchly refusing anything to do with the Hindu identity, because it's a British-made identity. It's very recent identity. Brahminic identity, which is a caste-based system identity, is true identity. It has been existing in India, where there was a huge distinction of castes. Now, the problem with this ruling class, they are in minority. They use a majority definition and consciousness to create their position of supremacy. Now, if everybody is Hindu, why is there still murder if two Hindus from different castes marry each other? Why is there such a polarity when somebody is accepted as Hindu, is not fully accepted into the family? We have been telling this, I mean, that repeatedly one can be a Hindu, but the caste is very unique. They will not allow. As I told, President of India is Dalit, but he's also Hindu. He's a proud Hindu. but he was not allowed to enter the temple sanctum. What does
Is
that
that verified? Because there are a lot of reports that was fake news.
No. It's a Times
Okay,
of India
happened.
report. No, it has happened. Of course, even it is available now. I mean, now the deniers are saying it didn't happen, and now second time he was allowed, but they were pissed, and this is the humiliation that this Hindu identity gives to Dalit. If everybody is Hindu, why not Brahmins go and clean human excreta the way Dalits are doing? Sweepers like in Pakistan or in this part of the world. If it is Hindu, why not have a communal interdining? The ministers in India go once in a while before election to have a dinner with a Dalit poor Dalits living in Basti to show that, we don't believe in caste. But they will not give their daughters and sons to marry the children. They will use the whole other different, If everybody is Hindu, why there exists caste-based professions? Why is a certain caste only dominating certain profession, like priesthood or positions of power? So this is a notorious facade created by Brahman Baniyas to retain their supremacy, from being a minority religion. Single digit number is what their representation is. Then they create a consciousness of India as a Hindu country. It is not a Hindu country. It never was, and I think it never will be, because Hindu is a very modern identity. It is created during census times. In fact, in the early years, the so-called Hindu reformers were themselves opposed to such clubbing. So what we see is there is this newfound British-made identity that is used as Hindu. If everything is Hindu, and if all are Hindu, then when there comes to giving reservations, or what we call affirmative actions loosely, why there is a staunch refusal to give same? Why they use the argument of merit? Why is there no benevolence towards those who are oppressed? If everybody is Hindu, when a Dalit woman gets raped and killed, why does not all Hindus come on street? Why only Dalits come on street? So these examples prove you that Hinduism is lie. There's nothing philosophical about it. A Vedic is different than Hinduism. They have clubbed it together because it becomes what Dr. Ambedkar aptly called Hinduism is a political philosophy. It's a political religion, the way it has come about. So the example that I gave you, you will really tell you that actually there is nothing common in this. There's always differences. There is always irregularity. There is always inacceptability. I think that sits at the center of what we understand as a faith. And same happens, I'm sure, in Pakistan. In fact, I would soon, once this thing is go, to just see myself as to what is the state of affairs in that part of the world as well.
So, I mean, even if the identity is recent, that in itself should not negate the existence of that identity or somebody who chooses to identify like that.
Absolutely.
So my problem with the Pakistani identity often is that it is used to suppress other identities. So if you tell somebody you're not a Baloch, you're not a Sindhi, so you should leave your Sindhi or Baloch heritage and become a Pakistani, that's problematic. But if somebody decides to be a Baloch, decides to be a Christian, decides to be a Pakistani, feels proud, dances on 14th August, waves the flag. I mean, once a cricket match happens, we're all Pakistani. Once a cricket match happens, we're all Indians. So in of itself, an identity being recent, I think that that should be fine. What would you say to critics who often attack you as being Hinduphobic? And I see you as the Malcolm X to Ambedkar's Martin Luther King, which is why there's some hit pieces on you as well. And when I put up the post, there were a couple of troll comments as well. So this idea that clearly you're creating some waves if they're creating news hit pieces, and they're not for an Indian audience because they're short in English for an English audience, targeting your university, telling your university to take action against you. So it's done with a very specific idea of cancel culture. So this idea that you're Hinduphobic, what would you say to that?
No, you see, this happens because there was developed a concept of Islamophobic. So if you create Islamophobic, then somebody will be, of course, be Hinduphobic. This is what I'm saying. It's always a competitive identities. So once we create a certain phobia, somebody will embrace that kind of phobic nature. And to going back to your previous excellent point, you can identify whatever identity you would like to. There's no problem with that. But don't use that as a shield or a weapon. And give an opportunity for people to not be you. But when it becomes a state practice, when it becomes a practice of the ruling hegemon, that's where we have. So our critique is not against people who identify themselves as Hindu. Our critique is against the people who utilize caste identities to suppress radical anti-caste voices under the rubric of being Hindu or Hindu hater in this case. So you understand, Hindu in India, majority are people belonging to lower caste communities. And it's not the Hindu the way Brahmins understand Hindu. See, their festivals are different than the festivals the lower caste people do, because they have their own indigenous god, their own folk culture. You will still see there are like temples in each villages of ancestors. That's the worship. This new form of worshipping gods and pantheon don't exist. They don't believe in Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and Mahesh probably, because it's again interpreted in multiple registers. There has been enormous debate between people who are worshippers of Vishnu, between worshippers of Brahma, and the worshippers of Shiva have a huge, and it's been a historic debate. The Shaivites, Vishnuites, it has been a mortal debate, serious debate. And Ambedkar has written about it in a text called Philosophy of Hinduism. I encourage all of you to read. In fact, also read Riddles in Hinduism. These are the two texts that really exposes the nuances of this kind of faith identity. Now, going back to your earlier question, I mean, every time we will stand for justice, you will be called names. And, the kind of viciousness that is directed against me is really not picked up as much as it is done, for example, if there is a Muslim in India, because there is a narrative is set up. Oh, Hindus attacking Muslims. But when it happens to Dalit, there will be no public approval. There will be no international media taking interest in this. There will be no Pakistanis concern about what is happening with this. Because you see the hegemonic identity because the person who is attacked as Hinduphobic, if he's a Muslim, they are also ruling class of the Muslim gentry. They're not from the lower castes. That's why the caste angle is paramount in this identity. And I think very few people even bother to inquire, to know as to what is happening. The kind of filth that they direct at you is really very, it's hellish. And yet, you have to find the ways, because one of the disadvantages of being a Dalit and being an activist is even a sympathetic ear is not lent to you because it is assumed that there is a contradiction and, you are meant to receive this.
I have a couple of questions regarding this, and I'm sorry about your experience. I'm sure you're not aware of my work, but anybody who's listening and listens to Pakistan Experience knows that every couple of weeks I'm cancelled on Twitter, and the state is after me, the ruling party. Unka main kafi favorite hu. Unke I think media team.
Well, welcome to the club, brother.
काफी बड़ी रहती है. So मेरे एक दो सवाल ये हैं कि if black people in America say white people are the devil, the idea is so entrenched that there has been slavery, that there's been systematic racism still exists. Even if a black person goes on TV and says the white people are the devil, you wouldn't necessarily see it as them inciting violence. Or if a feminist says all men are dogs, the idea of patriarchy is so entrenched that it will not be seen as a violent statement. Is it because the Dalit suppression, or I think you've also even called it the genocide? I believe the stat is every 5 days somebody dies in the sewers, cleaning literally, I'm sorry about the language, the shit of India. Yeah. So it could be categorized as a genocide. Is it because it's not so entrenched in the mass consciousness that when you do attack the powers, it's seen as an anomaly, or it's seen as offensive, or even incitement to violence, because that idea is still not entrenched into the mass consciousness of India, that there is an oppressed class and there is an oppressor class?
See, Shehzad, this is the thing. See, that we don't even have a state data as to how many Dalits are killed. There is a scant data, but many caste-related murders are not recorded as such. It is given a different angle. So the police records that we have that comes out each year should have this data represented. But many times, if it's a Dalit murder, they will not call it a murder by caste. So because of that, we don't even have an adequate number. So it starts with the state collecting data as well, you know. And second is, for the Dalit to be recognized, people really have to start looking at us as human beings first. Even the human agency is not offered. So our struggle is to get recognized as human beings. Baki jo baatein aap kar rahe ho na, civil right, political rights, that's like second and third stage. Dalits still want as you were saying, the mass consciousness attention as to record or register their existence as human beings, which really is a very serious predicament. And that's why it's a very much more pressing and urgent problem. Tell me any international media that has condemned openly the murder and violence of Dalits. See, the record says now it was third day, now 5 days, the record, the Dalit goes to sewer and comes out as a dead body. But every day, in an average, if you look at the rape of a Dalit woman, we had seen the record that before we go to bed, each day, at least 4 Dalit women are raped. Now that number is very underrepresented as opposed to the figures that we see. And then the kind of violence that takes place. Violence is not just a violence committed murder. It's also committed as a community violence. It's also committed on farm. If it's committed on factories. It's committed in personal relationships. So these are also violence that end up in extermination, assassination of the person. But these are not always registered as violence against Dalits. This is seen as violence against work. And you know what I mean? These are like skewed analysis that is applied.
And I'm sure it's underreported as hell. And मतलब रेपिस्ट से लॉजिक एक्सपेक्ट करना तो जी पाते हैं, and somehow maybe it is human nature, because slavery में भी ये बहुत होता था. But the idea that वो इतने untouchable हैं, let's say मान लें आपका religious belief है Dalits are untouchable, we cannot eat with them, we cannot even touch them, but you can rape them. Are you not touching them then? How does that even logically? So then it's all about power. It's not even about a religious belief.
Absolutely. No, that's what we are relegating. Now you understand. We are relegating the whole corpus of religious identity that is used to hypocritically deny us while at the same time desire us.
It's that same slavery idea about the idea of the female black.
Absolutely.
And even there's a lot of history written about masters' wives craving that black male slave idea. So would you just boil it down to racism, the idea of communality, that they're different from us? Is it class? Like, it's come to the extent where people are talking, and I'm all for animal rights, I'm all for them, but people are a lot more vocal about animal rights in India than they're about Dalit rights. Is it just कि ये dehumanization इतनी ज़्यादा हो चुकी है कि even the left or vocal liberals will not take this issue up?
See, this is a sad tragedy, right? And because, as I said, it is expected for Dalit to go into sewer. It is expected for Dalit to come and unclog their toilet if it is clogged. And these are basically people who believe or swear by Gandhi's values. Again, and these are the people who swear by whatever liberal values of socialism and Nehru, and even communists fall into the line of such entrapment, very unfortunately. Now, what we need to notice in this stream of thoughts is that there is not only denouncing of Dalit's right to claim, but they make it an issue of comparing, as you rightly said, animal rights as opposed to Dalit human rights, like as if we have to juxtapose ourselves to animals' dignity. You know what I mean? And there has been, they almost make us hate everyone else when we are not even hating anyone else. They just put you in a box to say, oh my God, this person doesn't appreciate feminist rights. This person doesn't appreciate queer people's rights, animal rights. As if we need to get a validation of that first to establish our rights. And so it really becomes like When will my chance come? Now that I'm able to speak, now you're telling I am not favorable to rights of gender justice. Nobody said that. But the problems that we are facing right now has never been addressed. So let us bring that alongside, we can take this. But they have used all kinds of modern technocratic language to undermine our call for justice.
I think Twitter is also a terrible platform where people just exist to attack each other, and sometimes nuance is lost. I did see one tweet which I was like, आपने शायद जल्दी जल्दी में कर दी होगी, attacks बहुत आ रहे होंगे, when people were, I think, calling you out for not talking about patriarchy within the Dalits, and you posted a picture of Dalit person in the sewers and said, look at this man, then talk about patriarchy. I'm sure that, at least from the outset, seems a little unnuanced, or seems like those memes which say feminism is leaving my body when World War III starts. I'm sure that's not what you meant, but I think people perceived it as such.
No, that was not even the point I was trying to make when they talk about the idea of Dalit patriarchy. So I was like, if you really want to understand Dalit patriarchy, understand the life of how patriarchy is constructed. If at all it is a patriarchy, if at all it is a question of Dalits being part of patriarchy, it's a very nuanced, layered topic. It cannot be just reduced by the sexual organ that you carry and then declare yourself as somebody who is a patriarch. If you are sent into sewer every day so you can put the roti in your child's plate every evening, that is the situation that a person is living in, as opposed to you who have several acres of land, live in an air conditioning house, or even a fan house, or even a house that has gone to school. You are nowhere comparable to this guy who is going into the sewer and comparing your experiences with these people and declaring, oh, this person is patriarchal. Can you imagine what kind of neurotic society we have created in this reductionism? That was all. Nobody wants to claim a pure position. Of course, patriarchy exists in every society, in every community. There is no denying, and we all have to collectively work. All I wanted to draw the attention to was, do you even understand the life Dalits go through before really making your liberal woke statement? And unfortunately, it has become liberal woke, even though it might have a genuine concern, but it doesn't come across as such.
It's the same perils of neoliberalism that exist everywhere. Even you mentioned empowerment. It's almost become such a dirty word that advertisements or corporations will have one black person or will have one female and call it empowerment, the idea of girl boss feminism, which is why I like the idea of intersectionality in academia now. So if a woman, God forbid, is raped on the street at night, who's a Dalit Muslim poor woman, was she raped because she's a woman? Was she raped because she's a Muslim? Was she raped because she's a Dalit? Or was she raped because of all those things that exist? That's all those identities exist. And that's a power dynamic. The person who was maybe driving the car and saw that made in that moment. It's not just one single identity.
I think what has also happened, as much as the term and the phenomena is good, as our intersectionality, the women who have privilege of class or queer people who have privilege of caste have utilized that to undermine the voices. The same happened in America.
ये Dave Chappelle वाली बातें कर रहे हैं आप.
White
Dave Chappelle special.
Yeah, I've seen. I mean, I don't remember his content, but what you have noticed is like, sure, there are power matrices, but how can a white woman suddenly become intersectional by undermining a black person's voice? Can you see, like, what is the relation here? The black person was a slave. You were still the wife of a master. In neoliberal, this is the outcome of neoliberal identities. Neoliberalism has given you breadcrumbs. They have asked you to fight amongst you instead of creating a revolutionary mandate. And you have stuck up with your own identities, which you think is very personal. And you have used this to create intra-war amongst yourselves instead of focusing on the larger enemy. And what happens is it becomes an issue of ego as opposed to the issue of movement. Movement has a cause. Ego has a belief that is personal. If my personal belief, and if I'm wounded, my ego is wounded, I will use my identity to put you down. Shehzad, I am XYZ. How dare you tell me like this? And you will say, I am also XYZ. I can't talk to you. And then we will become like this kids who are measuring the size of their nada, jo hota hai, rassi hoti hai jo, the kind of their kacha. And it really is like that reductible debate. Like my underwear is bigger than your underwear. What are you talking about? So this is really something, of course, that there are various layers to this debate as well. But I would rather side with a black man who is first generation and opposed to a white woman who is been educated for several generations and now want to claim a position of victimhood to undermine the voice of the black man. Not that the black man is not capable, but you have to understand the history has been constructed differently. In Indian case, especially in the caste case, it's been a history of more than 3,500 years. So cut me some slack before we really, delve into it. That doesn't reduce the culpability of person. If you are willing to critique neoliberalism while holding on to your identity, I'm all for it.
So don't you think I agree with you. For instance, was the suffragette movement great? I think it was phenomenal. All that they achieved was one of the arguments that they presented, that we're women, so we're better than blacks, so we should be given the right to vote over the black. Absolutely. Severely racist, severely problematic. So you can appreciate the fact that they fought for women to vote, but you can also realize that some of them were deeply racist. But do you think that neoliberalism has you in a checkmate when it comes to identity politics? Because a Kamala Harris might be supported by black people and women because she's a black woman, whereas maybe those communities would be better served by a white man like Bernie Sanders. But that doesn't matter, because then you talk about Bernie Bros. So in terms of fighting the structure, the ideal may be the annihilation of caste, but till you don't reach there, everything is defined in terms of identity. They will see you as a Dalit. So the only way for you to fight your rights is to reaffirm that Dalit identity. Then you just dig deeper into those identity politics where you're defining everything as Dalit. And you have to, because the system is unfair. The reservation, you need reservations because the system is inherently unfair. So you need that positive affirmation. But you will never live in an identity-less world, because the only way to get any power in the current world is through the reaffirmation of identity. So it's a catch-22.
No, and I think that's why we have rightly pointed out, and that's why I'm saying that identity can be an expressive force to then critique the larger system. If I'm just using my Dalit identity to provide much more ammunition to a neoliberalism, that is not helping nobody. It is actually validating the forces of neoliberalism. But if I use my identity to then create a much more robust critique of neoliberal capitalism, to say like, listen, this is something that has happened. It's not, see, identities are micro. They are not going to end. Even within Dalits, there is sub-Dalit. Within sub-Dalit, there is gender, there is patriarchy, there is region, there is language, there is accent, what kind of food, there is class. You see, it goes to lowest level. And at the end of the day, you might not even find the person you are looking for in the thing, because by the time all the boxes you were checking to exclude have left nobody. So what we are saying is, let this debate continue. Let this identity-based politics, which is not wrong. Everybody has identity and everybody has a politics of their identity. But let it not become a space of contesting each other based on identities. Identities should be able to create solidarity and unite you, then creating a huge vast of gap amongst yourself. And if that is not happening, then we have to really think, okay, who can I?
But strategically, I mean, I'm sure you think a lot about this when this is what your activism is. How do you do both? How do you create a Dalit party, then ask Dalits to vote for a Dalit party, but then also imagine an identity-less world? And I'm not saying what you're doing is wrong, because you absolutely have to. The world is unfair. You 100% have to, because if Dalits are being targeted and killed for being Dalit, if Dalit women are being raped for being Dalit, then you have to reaffirm that Dalit identity to show people, like the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm a huge supporter of BLM. They have to say Black Lives Matter because Black lives are in danger. But once you keep reaffirming those identities, the utopia of an identity-less world just seems to get further and further.
See, I think that's why we have to understand the people who have investment in maintaining identities are not the ones who are oppressed by identities. These are the people who would like to get rid of those identities. And that's why, as I was saying, we need to create a new canon of identities that will unite larger group than individual pockets of group. So if we are not responsible for creating identities, there is very little that we will invest ourselves in maintaining it. Down the line, there will be a project of trying to slowly, and that's why within Dalit politics, the idea of Bahujan is majority. It's like you can come have your own individual caste, and we don't want to deny you that, but also you would have to submit or rather claim and commit to a larger project of emancipation and liberation. And I think we need to focus in that perspective. Now, neoliberalism has gotten itself a piece of cake by creating new identities, identity-based politics, by granting them grants and giving them funding. So the real critique of corporate capitalism that has from erstwhile IMF and World Bank to now becoming a private companies, millionaires, non-profit capitalism has received a grant from people's approval, like it has received a sanction. And so what we need to then do is to create a multiple layer of dialogues that will not reduce. So we are still in a stage where we don't know what this identity politics looks like in 10 years. We are in the midst of it, right? So that's why I've kept my comments elsewhere also unconclusive, because there is no evidence of such. We can talk about 1970s policies of neoliberalism in today's context because we see what happened, Vietnam War and all this new. But right now we are in a stage of this identity-based politics of neoliberalism. So maybe give it a few years, maybe a decade or so, and see in reflection what we achieved, what we did not achieve. But this debate has really become a reductive debate. It's become left or right. It's like with us or without us. The Bush is famous. And it's also the left is responsible, the right is responsible. Everybody is responsible for creating a very polarized world. Now, for example, I know somebody and, I know the person and, the person has been fantastic, blah, blah, blah. But somebody accused the person of XYZ. Okay. Tomorrow, Shehzad will accuse me. Let's say, oh, he was Islamophobic, blah, blah, blah. Now, or no, somebody tells me Shehzad is Islamophobic. But with the way I've interacted with Shehzad, I have not seen nothing of that, right? But now Shehzad has been Islamophobic somewhere else. Now, I am put in a fix that I have to now side with somebody who claims that Shehzad was Islamophobic. But can I also say, listen, he must have been, I don't know. But the way I've interacted with him, I have not seen any of these traces. Am I allowed to express that opinion in today's world? No. Because you are with us or we are without us, against us, excuse me. And that's the only problem I have with this. All other identity-based politics and the affirmation of your own self, gender, sexuality, all of that is good for me. As long as it provides you dignity, it provides you purpose for a life that you really seek, that you really would like to live, you would like to usher the goodness and peace in everybody, nobody has a problem. What I am really not sure with is this kind of polarization. So I'm like, I can say Putin is a bad person, but can I also say NATO is also responsible for the havoc? If you look at the history of NATO, it has always been bombing the rest of the world. But today, you can't say this because then you are siding with Putin. So this is why people who are on a progressive side of politics really are withdrawing themselves. And we really need to think how our future is going to look like, because the younger generation is going to be much more intolerant. Today, people are reacting what they feel than what they see, and which is dangerous.
It's the inherent stupidity of things like cancel culture that the left for years hang their hat on. It's been exposed because the right has co-opted it so easily. So even in your case, all they have to do is the state media has to do hit pieces calling you Hinduphobic, because the left has created this idea that if somebody says something which may be perceived as problematic by some people, anything you say will hurt some people. The criteria for canceling somebody should not be that somebody was hurt. Us talking here will hurt a lot of people. Does that mean we should stop having a voice because of that?
See, that's why we create. See, this is because we created a space of overt liberalism. This is not how it works. What overt liberalism means is we have created that if I have to fill a glass of water in this, water in this, excuse me, I can only fill it until it's required. If I overflow, it's going to not be useful for anybody. What we have done is we have not kept in check the liberal values. We have allowed them, and right has easily embraced it. Right wants that. It has used the same formula that the left used against it. And so now people are going away from left. The very reason that the people who were traditional working class vote for any democratic party in America went easily to the right. Why is right rising? Because the working class has been told you are wrong in so many ways. And they are like, listen, you elite, listen, you billionaire, listen, you Yale, you graduated person. We are so they assume they are underdogs, and they went to the right very easily because right is feeding on that. Not that right is any more, saintly in this.
If I may ask you this question, and I agree with you. And when Hillary Clinton also said basket of deplorables, I was like, yeah, मतलब ये क्या बातें करने वाली है? आपको उनसे वोट भी चाहिए, फिर आप उनको ये भी बोल रहे हैं. This idea that the left alienates certain people by labeling them as the enemy, and I think you've also been criticized for that by some people. And the conversation that we had today had a lot of nuance, what you mean by Hindu, what you mean by Hinduism, and anybody who hears that will be clear. But I saw one of your tweets that was quoted by people calling you Hinduphobic. I think it said Ambedkar was right. Hindus are sick people and their books train their mind. So when somebody who's proud of their Hindu identity, then they read that and they don't see the nuance that you mean that Brahminic oppressor class, and they see themselves as being attacked. And again, I'm the last person to tone police. I say really, really problematic things quite openly because I feel like it's the job of a comedian to make fun of the powerful. So if I'm calling Imran Khan an idiot, I don't see that as being problematic because he's the prime minister and I have every right to do that. But people who do may read a tweet like that and then not bother reading your books or not bother reading your work and just in their idea think of you as the enemy. Is there something you want to say to those people?
No, I think you're right also, but the point is we have to understand in what context that tweet was made. It was made when a person who was mistreated, there was a defense provided by the Hindus to say this person. In fact, what happened, there was a case of a Dalit woman who was raped. And the people who were tweeting that, they were saying that she was desiring that man. And now that she didn't. So now you tell me, what do you want me to respond to that? And these are the people who have accounts of verified Hindus, Vahini, Hindu, blah, 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 this and this. So that response cannot be civil response. It has to be told the way it is. Had it been a different issue of certain nature, yeah, we can. But Ambedkar then was right. He wrote in Annihilation of Caste that if I made Hindus, people realize that they're the sick men of India, I shall have served the purpose. And why? You have to read the entire text. But this is the reductive, illiterate, unpaired activism of right. They don't have anything good to say. And of course, I've been complained so many times, and I don't really, I'm not really worried about it. But if there is a victim who belongs to the marginalized, vulnerable group, not least caste, but also gender, and if there is a brutal rape that has been exposed, and then you have the audacity to say that this woman was expecting rape from this man, desiring this man, I don't think there is any more justifiable civic nobility that can be applied in this case.
I think that's the problem with Twitter, right? People forget the context. People forget what context somebody was said in, but that tweet lives forever. So if somebody has a screenshot, then whatever you say.
And that's the thing. They only have the screenshot. They don't have the conversation of previous nature. And
welcome to Twitter, sir. Welcome to Twitter. If you have 10 minutes more, there are a lot of questions. I'm sure we won't be able to get through most of them. But can I just get like quick answers for the questions people have asked?
Okay, we can do it. Yeah.
What are his views about, and this is Silent Observer on YouTube, what are his views about Ambedkar's belief that Dalit are not Hindus?
Which is true. As I already deciphered, like Hindu, as I said, is not a theological identity. Vedic Brahmanism is. And within that context, how come Hindus are? Because these were outcasts, these were Chandals, these were not allowed to worship in the same temple, to allowed access to the same community, to their own children. It was always an outcast community. So if somebody is not in your house, how can you claim that person belongs to your house? It's like your chowkidar who sits outside, you are saying, oh, chowkidar are also part of family. And then you ask them, does he have a house in room in your house? No. Does he allow to share food with you? No. So similarly, it's the same
Pakistan में तो चौकीदार का घर है. We are actually the rent. The चौकीदार owns everything in Pakistan. We are slightly different.
Well, welcome to our chowkidars as well.
Why new generation of educated Dalits are Sanskritized and not assertive about their own identity? Somebody also on Twitter said, why do you still use your, I don't know if they said Sanskrit or Hindu name, Suraj, and why don't you change that if you want to be really assertive? Just asking.
Oh, no. I think that that's the thing. The Brahmins have usurpated everything that belonged to the native identities and made it Hindu. So the canon of, that's why I said there are independent thousands and thousands of faith existing in India. Among Muslims, because these are basically later identities of religion. People still follow their traditional folk identities of their indigenous faith. So that's this thing. And also, my name is was actually originally named Suradhay. It was a very jargon of Marathi given by the founder of Dalit Panther, who my dad was good friends with. But people were finding it difficult to pronounce. And so then it had to be eventually changed. So it's a story. Maybe I'll write a short story on that.
Why the shifting of Dalits and other backward castes towards BJP and BSP in UP, otherwise voting majority for Congress and other northern states? Maybe a connected question, as somebody replying to one of your tweets gave stats that in Gujarat, violence against Muslim, apparently a majority of the people committing the violence were Dalits.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why we are refusing the Hindu Muslimization of India, the dichotomy. I've written about this. It's a foolish dichotomy, because once you make someone Muslim, then the non-Muslim is Hindu automatically. How is it possible? And that's why Dalits are being fanaticized, radicalized, not least by Congress, but also these regimes. And it's an old story. One has to read history concretely. One cannot read a fashionable, popular history to make an argument. It has to be concrete, academic enterprise that really puts you in picture. It is from 1860s that this kind of move happens. And Dalits have been radicalized into thinking they are Hindus. And when they are Hindus, they are told your enemy is Muslim. And when they see Muslim living, and Dalits and Muslims are neighbors. And झगड़े ज़्यादा किस में होते हैं? If you live in a मोहल्ले में झगड़े ज़्यादा जो एक दूसरे के घर जिसके बाजू में उन्हीं के साथ होते हैं ना, because it's like resources, it's like service, it's like whatever is it. तो neighbors में ही ज़्यादा झगड़े होते हैं. So the Savarnas of Hindus have used this neighborly friend, instead of turning them friends, they have used this as a canon of animosity. And that's why we don't want Dalits to become the foot soldiers of the Savarnas to beat Muslims or we would like to create a common identity. So even we are telling Muslims, you might be a Muslim, but before that, you are a native. You belong to this, your land, you're our brother. If you keep on being fanatic, दाढ़ी वाड़ी बना के ये वो बोलते रहेंगे, तो you are nobody for me then. Because what you do is you essentially dissociate yourself by saying, I'm a Muslim, and then you practice your own caste-based system. That's not going to work. So for us, the Muslims have to come down, as well as the Dalits are also coming down on the same route. It has to happen both ways. And that's why, this struggle is my critique is not only against Hindus, but also Ashraf Musalmans, the elite Musalmans, who never lost the power and still continue to enjoy the power, even though BJP is in the state, because the stakes are quite high in the nation.
In many ways, the similar arguments are presented. Even when we talk about it, they're like, if BJP is not so great for Muslims, then why are these Muslim leaders existing in BJP? Just that tokenism somehow should suffice, and that we should be happy with. बस यार हमारे 4-5 लोग ले लिए हैं, अब मार लो, genocide कर लो.
No, we are creating actually a unity of Dalit Muslims and other backward people, because that's the actual unity. That's the majority. Without that unity, and that's why Dalit political parties, you will see anywhere in India, any Dalit political party has sizable number of Dalits, Muslims in positions of power. You go in South, the secretary, general secretary, deputy general secretaries are Muslims. Also in BSP, the political party, the largest political party in India, belong to non-BJP, non-Congress, has majority also Muslims. And I think this is the formula created by Dalits first. Eventually, Congress and BJP mimicked it in their own ways.
You're a brilliant man. I can sit here and talk to you for hours. Maybe I'll just take one more question. There is a list of them. I will bother you again for your time because honestly, I can sit here and talk to you for hours. But I'll take this one last question. Ask him about the Hindutva corporate nexus and why will any Bahujan movement without money power be able to defeat them? Even Behenji Mahavati had to take a lot of money from capitalists to come to power and work towards the Bahujan movement. But it was the corporate backing which eventually led to her decline. How to resolve this?
No, I think it's partly true and partly not true. The analysis is BSP is the Behenji Mayavati party is a basically missionary party, and people, working class people, everyday people send their donations. Like I remember my house would also, it's basically the money that comes from people, and every month each unit is asked to raise money, so it adds to the fund of the party, and then that uses for its own rallying and other purposes. So it has not always relied, because the whole idea was to denounce Brahmin and Baniyas, and it still is, even though it will call it Sarvajan. But the idea is capitalism has been always a critique. Redistribution of land has been on the agenda, and it has done very effectively without calling it as such. The way left makes it as hula baloo. They did it already without calling it in the leftist terms. At the end of the day, kaam ho gaya na? You got the land and you established. But yeah, that is also true that the corporate nexus is increasingly making inroads. And one of the things we would like to do is to create a capital of Bahujan people, the SC, ST, the Dalit, Adivasi, the backward caste, the Muslims, and empower some of these entrepreneurs and capital owning groups, so then they can really stand on their feet and potentially provide, because Congress's funding comes from these corporate houses which they have been patronizing for several, it is quid pro quo. Same Adani, Ambani for BJP and many. So there was Birla. So also we need our own base, but which might not necessarily replicate the capitalist model, but a model that will be redistribution of resources eventually.
More power to you. Hopefully I can bother you again soon, because I love talking to you. So it was a great conversation. Thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Shehzad, thank you. I really wish you a pleasant time with Pakistani experience. And I think I was really excited to come. I am actually traveling. I'm in Europe now. But when your invite came, I couldn't resist, because it's very rarely one gets to talk to our own people across the border. So I had to prioritize this. And I'm so glad I did.
Thank you so much, sir. And anytime you want to come to Pakistan, you need any help, my home's open to you. You're more than welcome to come, sir. Aapke apna hi ghar samjhe.
No. I will take up on that offer, in fact, and we'll have some nice biryanis and some nice gosh over our several talks.
Done, sir. And if you need any help, if you need any invitations, itna main elite nahi hu, but thode bahut connections hai. I can help any way you want. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Shehzad. Stay well, brother. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.